Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post with me, Ghadi Francis. This is our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates and stories from the world's most volatile region. Iraq has declared that the Islamic State was defeated 4 years ago, and since then, cracks between Baghdad and the Kurdish forces meant that the group has slowly crept back. With the U.S. combat mission officially ending in December 31st, and the shadow of the ISIS resurgence looming over Baghdad, how well will this partnership hold in the coming days? We tell you more.
In Iraq, soldiers scan for ISIS terrorists. Their Kurdish counterparts do the same, not far away. This scene earlier played out in the village of Leipan, a rare instance of coordination between Baghdad and the semi-autonomous Kurdish region. The two sides fortified on a joint position, aimed at defending the village against attacks by the Islamic State. The Iraq government and the Kurds have a long-standing territorial dispute, but the two have a common enemy, the Islamic State. Early in December, ISIS stepped up terrorist attacks in several provinces. In less than 30 days, the group killed several Kurdish fighters and Iraqi troops. ISIS seized control of swaths of land in Iraq in 2014. Both Iraq and the US battled the group for over 3 years. It was declared territorially defeated in 2017, but has continued to carry out bombings and abductions in provinces. Currently, the Islamic State have taken shelter in a security vacuum. The rivalry between Baghdad and the Kurds opened up cracks, through which the Islamic State has crept back. A long-disputed zone snaking through 4 provinces: Nineveh, Kirkuk, Salahuddin, and Diyala. The forces of either side did not enter this region. In some places, the zone was up to 40 kilometers wide, so the focus was on the withdrawal of the US forces. The last time the United States tried to withdraw its troops in 2011, it was a perfect opportunity for the Islamic State to seize Mosul. But this time it was much less likely. The Islamic State is just remnants of its past right now. Their focus remains on other ungoverned territories, and they are not likely to take on the Iraqi forces. But the recent attacks signal otherwise. Between 2009 and 2014, Iraqi and Kurdish forces conducted what were joint security operations in the northern provinces, but the collapse of the Iraqi army ended the arrangement. This time, Baghdad and the Kurds are cooperating again, but both sides say they need the Americans to help keep it together. The US combat mission in Iraq formally ended on December 31st. They are no longer directly involved in combat against the Islamic State. They've just been advising and training troops. But they are helping in bridging the gaps between Baghdad and the Kurds. Will this fragile security partnership hold? That remains the big question in the next chapter of Iraq's war with the Islamic State. West Asia Bureau, WION. World is One.
We have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. We're going to go to Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. But first, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
In a landmark ruling, a German court has sentenced a former Syrian colonel to life in prison for committing crimes against humanity. This is the first ever torture trial against President Bashar al-Assad's regime. Government-sponsored tree planting in an Israeli desert has set off violent protests by Bedouin Arabs who see deforestation as discriminatory encroachment by the state, sowing discord within the coalition government. The World Health Organization has said Omicron probably caused a COVID-19 surge in the Mideast in early January, warning that some countries in the group still have very low vaccination rates. Iran says it won't officially recognize the Taliban government yet. Tehran has been in constant contact with the Taliban since its August takeover, but has called for an inclusive government. 7 Indian crew members are present on a UAE-flagged ship seized by Yemen's Houthi rebels. The Ministry of External Affairs said the government of India is making all efforts to secure their early release. A rare hailstorm has left sand dunes covered in snow outside Badr city in Saudi Arabia. Locals were seen gathering to enjoy the scenes and cars driving on a nearby motorway in the unusual white landscape.
Authorities in Saudi Arabia have launched an investigation after a video of a group of 5 samba dancers performing in the streets of Jazan in a state-run festival went viral. Now, entertainment forms a key part of Mohammed bin Salman's 2030 vision. And this latest backlash by religious groups has sparked questions about it. We tell you more.
A Formula One Grand Prix. A film festival. A women's football league. And a rave party in the middle of the desert. Saudi Arabia is trying to break its conservative image, a 2030 vision to move away from oil and diversify the economy. This brings us to this Jazan Winter Festival, one of the many organized by Saudi authorities. But the festival is now at the center of controversy because of these samba dancers. These foreign dancers wearing traditional samba attire have sparked outrage. The videos of these dancers sparked massive backlash, with religious groups saying that Riyadh is veering away from Islamic principles. Saudi Arabia has even launched an investigation, with the attire being seemingly in defiance of its Islamic dress code for women. In December, the kingdom came under similar criticism, especially from its conservative groups. The issue in question was a rave party where women and men were dancing together. In focus is the House of Saud. It is a name synonymous to Saudi Arabia. The royal family makes the rules for the desert kingdom. For years, people here have lived under strict rules dictated by the old guard. But then came Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The de facto ruler had a vision, a mission to convince the world that the ultra-conservative kingdom was on a new path. While Saudi Arabia may have new rules for all, but when it comes to mindsets, the divide remains. The divide between the old and the new guard. It is difficult to gauge how Saudis view these changes. The Crown Prince's 2030 vision is that of a new Saudi Arabia, one that is economically diverse and more tolerant. Riyadh wants to diversify its economy away from oil and attract more investors and tourists. But a real image makeover will take a lot more. It will need the changing of mindsets, a reform of the old guard. So while winds of changes may be blowing here, as the dust settles, will it leave behind any real reforms? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Jordan's parliament has approved constitutional amendments granting King Abdullah II sweeping powers. But in fact, what was pegged as a move to modernize the constitution was also viewed by many in the country as a way to consolidate power after last year's coup. Let's take a look.
This is the Jordanian parliament, where a heated row led to scuffles. Members pushed and shoved each other as fistfights broke out over a debate on constitutional reforms. The reforms were later approved, but not without much controversy. The focus is on one man alone, King Abdullah II, the ruler of Jordan. The monarch has been accused of expanding his power, consolidating them with more reforms to the constitution. On 14th of November, 30 amendments were submitted to the parliament. On paper, they look promising. They seek to broaden participation in the government and have members of the parliament choose the prime minister. But there are 8 reforms that have caused an uproar. They give the king sweeping new powers to appoint and dismiss officials. It gives the Jordanian monarch the power to appoint and dismiss the Chief Justice, head of the Sharia Judicial Council, the Grand Mufti, Chief of the Royal Court, and the king's advisors. This is in addition to the king's considerable powers. He already controls who becomes the prime minister, as well as the heads of the military and the intelligence agency. He can also dissolve the parliament at will. King Abdullah says he wants to become a constitutional monarch one day. But these new additions signal otherwise, making the Jordanian monarch more powerful by the day. It's not like King Abdullah doesn't have his plate full already. A coup, rising discontent among tribes, winds of change in West Asia, and a reconciliation with its neighbor. The Hashemite dynasty is facing challenges both externally and internally. For years, brothers in the line of succession have often been dumped for sons. But never did the family wash its dirty linen in public until the coup that was attempted last year, when an internal rift became public gossip for all. The main person behind this is the king's half-brother, Hamza bin Hussein, a popular figure in Jordan and a spitting image of his father, the late King Hussein. Hamza was the king's favorite, but he was too young to take over the throne. So, when Hussein died a premature death in 1999, Abdullah II became king. Hamza was named the crown prince. This was the late king's dying wish. But it all changed in 2004. King Abdullah stripped his brother of his title. He wanted his son to succeed him. Thus emerged a rift in the Hashemite kingdom. The social tensions laid bare by the palace drama can be seen almost everywhere in the kingdom. Economic crisis frayed the historic patronage for loyalty bond, a sacred bond between Jordan's king and its tribes, a bedrock of the Hashemite family's decades-long rule. The prince has since been silenced, his purported co-conspirators arrested. But insiders fear that anger is simmering. With the latest consolidation of power by the monarch, critics say it could erupt at any moment. A warning bound to worry the kingdom's Western allies. The question remains, will the monarchy survive another descent? West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Syria's decade-long war has forced many outside the classroom and into child labor. They work long hours to support their families in difficult conditions, all to put food on the table and provide education for their siblings to protect them from suffering a similar fate. Let's take a look.
In the makeshift oil refinery in Syria, Amir al-Shaban kneels in the freezing mud. He is busy packing handfuls of charcoal in a plastic bag. Then he drags the heavy bag nearly half his size. The task is to feed a furnace that emits toxic fumes. This is what the 12-year-old's daily routine looks like. No school, no books, and breathing in fumes from a furnace. When Amir finishes his shift, he washes off soot from his hands, walking back to a nearby displacement camp. This is where he lives with his parents and 5 younger siblings. His father suffers from diabetes and clogged arteries. This means that the family is mostly reliant on Amir's monthly income of $5.
I am Amir Al-Shayaban. We fled 8 years ago. I work here at the oil refinery to support my family. 4 of my siblings were killed by the regime. When we came here, I was the oldest sibling in my family, so I came to work at the oil refinery. I earn 20,000 Syrian pounds per week, and this is barely enough to feed my family. We have debts, so I have to work here. It's not in my hands. I'm not going to school and don't want my siblings to work. I work summers and winters in the refinery to support my parents.
Syria's decade-long conflict has forced Amir and several others out of the classroom and into scrapyards and factories. Like the 15-year-old Mohammed Makhzoom, he works 12 hours a day to support his younger siblings. Mohammed has been working since he was 9. He dropped out of school after his parents were killed in the conflict.
My mother and father died when I was small. When my mother died, I started working here at the metal scrapyard to support my siblings. I'm their mother and father. I work from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening.
This is the reality of Syria's children. An estimated 2.5 million children in Syria are out of school. Another 1.6 million are at risk of dropping out. 9 in 10 children in Syria live in poverty. There is no official data in Syria on child labor rates, but they have increased steadily during the conflict. The COVID-19 pandemic and an economic crisis is fueling further spikes. The last decade has left a traumatic toll on a generation of Syrians, a childhood devoid of laughter and innocence. They were born into unimaginable violence, raised in the shackles of conflict, leading lives that bear the physical and emotional scars of a war-torn nation. For the world, it is a decade of conflict in Syria. But for the country's children, it is a lifetime of trauma. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Iraqi boxing women are aiming a sucker punch at gender taboos. More and more women in the country are taking up martial arts. In the holy Iraqi city of Najaf, the sight of a women's boxing hall is highly unusual. But women here are fighting the deeply ingrained taboos. We tell you more.
Iraqi boxer Bushra al-Hajjar jumps into the ring. Gloves raised to eye level and strikes out at her sparring partner. Her biggest struggle, however, is to deliver a blow against social taboos. In Iraq's city of Najaf, the sight of a women's boxing hall is unusual. But the 35-year-old is fighting deeply ingrained taboos.
The idea to train at home came to me because there were many pressures on me. I was responsible for 2 children and a house, and the children needed me. At the same time, I'm a student. I got the idea that I have an empty room on the 3rd floor, an empty room that was fit for boxing.
Twice a week, she trains at a private university in Najaf. This is located 100 kilometers south of Baghdad. In overwhelmingly conservative Iraq, her adventure raised eyebrows. But Bushra did not take a break from her punching bag. 16-year-old boxing student Ola Mustafa has a different story. She has the support of not only her trainer, but also her parents and brother, signaling that social change is afoot in the war-torn nation.
We live in a patriarchal society that fights successful women when it comes to many matters. Gradually, the people will begin to accept them because the more there are women trying to achieve their dreams, the more will the society accept them.
In the past, Iraq had a proud tradition of women in sports. Whether it was basketball, volleyball or cycling, women's teams regularly took part in regional tournaments. But sanctions, decades of conflict and a hardening of conservative social values brought this era to a close. In recent years, there has been a timid reversal, with women taking up a range of sports, bringing down glass ceilings in the country. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
West Asia is not without its share of culture, beauty and oddities. This is why in our next segment, Curiosities, we bring you some heartwarming stories from the region.
الثاني ومنافسات كبيرة. مكحول العين العادنة صلوا عليه.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis and you're watching WION World is One.